Hello and welcome to the Violin Geek Podcast. I'm your host, Laurel Thomsen, and I'm excited to share an interview I did recently with violinist Maya Lorenzen. Maya has recently released a new album called Back to Bach, in which she features one of the Bach Partitas along with two more modern works which were inspired by Bach, and we'll look forward to hearing a few clips from that album. Maya also gave us some great insight into how she approaches a new work and balances the needs of works from different musical eras with perhaps different moods and different emotions. And she offered some wonderful tips for how to approach multi-stops, which of course are quite prevalent in the music of Bach, and of course all throughout the solo violin repertoire. And we also landed on a bit of a theme with this idea of music as a healing force, bringing together disparate parts that might be experiencing conflict. So whether those conflicts are happening externally, out in the world between different people, different countries, or happening internally in our own inner landscape and as we wrestle our own demons. We chat about how we can overcome these times of trials and setbacks and find a way through to get back on track and find joy in music again. And before we launch into the interview, I just wanted to read a little bit from Maya's biography. Israeli-German violinist Maya Lorenzen has performed around the world as a soloist and ensemble player. She is a prize winner of the 2016 Karl Adler competition in Germany and the 2013 Meta Chamber Music competition in Israel. Maya has performed under the baton of Daniel Barenboim in venues such as the Royal Albert Hall during the BBC Proms, Lucerne Festival, Salzburg Festival, Philharmonie de Paris, Carnegie Hall, the John F. Kennedy Center, the Chicago Symphony Center, and the Walt Disney Concert Hall. Maya has been an invited soloist with the Israeli Symphony Orchestra, the Jerusalem Symphony, and the Israeli Conservatory Orchestra, and she has also served as concertmaster with various orchestras, including the Young Israeli Philharmonic. I hope you enjoy our wide-ranging conversation, and I'll meet you on the other side. Hello, Maya, and welcome to the Violin Geek Podcast. How's your day going?
Going pretty well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you today.
It's nice to finally make it happen. We've been chatting back and forth on email for, it feels like at least 6 months now or something. And you've been quite busy. You've traveled to Europe, it sounds like at least once, to perform, and you've been wrapping up a doctorate. So where are we speaking to you today from?
Yes, it's been a busy couple of months. I am in my apartment in Brooklyn, New York. And as you said, I've been wrapping up my doctorate in music, which I had my final recital last week, and had a lot of exams and papers to write before that. So it's a very, very exciting times.
Yeah, it's a big push to wrap that all up, and congratulations having a final recital just so recently. And what was your certain area of study?
Well, I got a DMA, which is doctorate in musical arts, and my focus, or say the title, is music performance, specifically violin performance. I've focused on two big things in the past 5 years. One of them is a subject that I've always been really fascinated with, and I got to dig deep into and do a lot of research on, which was cool. It was fingerings. So just looking at the entire progression and the history of when did fingerings first start appearing, and when was the first appearance of, or the first appearances of composers or violinists putting fingerings in, and what were the methods and where they were coming from, and the entire development of that until, say, Paganini, and then how it influences our artistic choices and playing nowadays. So that was a big topic that I loved researching.
That's fascinating. That fascinates me. And I'll have students, sometimes they're working on maybe Bach or something like that, and we pull out the original manuscript, or maybe it's a copy of a copy or something, but something that's a little hard to read, but we see, wow, there are no markings basically whatsoever other than the notes and maybe a couple slurs, and that's about it. And their minds are blown, sort of, because they think, oh, I should be shifting here, I should be doing this fingering. And yeah, it's really not true. So what did you find? When did fingerings really become prevalent in sheet music? Was there sort of it reached a critical mass and they all started populating our scores, or?
Yeah, well, there were a lot of different appearances beforehand, especially in etudes and studies in the late, I would say the late classical period. And the first actual, or let's say the first big book that we can get a lot of knowledge from is Leopold Mozart's book, where he dedicates a whole chapter about fingerings. They just had a lot of rules that were, let's say, not very well respected in the late Romantic era. And I mean, in my research, I found that it's something that started with very strict rules and patterns that no one even dared to break. Got stretched and stretched and stretched over centuries, decades and centuries, until it reached almost an explosion with the breadth of possibilities that violinists got to. With, there's no better example, Paganini Caprices, and his abilities as a violinist as well. Thanks to a lot of practices that we have today, and to discovering all those books and the literature, we are able to make better decisions and see all the angles of each challenge, but also make a decision that's based off of knowledge and the history.
Well, in different body types, right? Paganini had large hands, so of course he could do things that maybe people coming before him couldn't do. Or, I think about women versus men, and what our hand shapes are like, and how long our fingers are, but also maybe how wide our knuckles are, and all of these things play a role. And I remember growing up, and there were some editions of pieces that I was working on where I just felt like I couldn't make that fingering happen musically, right? Like I could pull it off, but it just wasn't going to be that beautiful high note with vibrato at the top. It was just going to be like this painful stretch or something, right? And so trying to figure out different ways to adjust the hand is one thing, but then it was kind of a revelation to me to then get some other editions edited by other people of some of those same pieces and see, oh, they're completely doing something different. And just feeling like it's okay to be me, right? And so it sounds like through this sort of classical into the Romantic era, there's probably a lot of people that are experiencing that, right? And then now we get all the benefit of having this knowledge. And sure, I mean, Leopold Mozart, he was writing some of the early information about how to play violin and stuff, right? But it's nice to take that all and sort of simmer it down. And it sounds like that's what you've been studying.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge subject, and I could go, we could do a whole episode on that.
Yes.
But I also really love what you said about finding ways that work for you and are comfortable for you, and ways that help you express yourself and not just in a way that makes everyone else happy, but
yeah. Well, sometimes, and now that there's YouTube, I'm almost happy that I didn't have YouTube when I was really young. It didn't exist yet, because I think it just would have overwhelmed me. And in some ways it's great. And I'm happy that my students get that, to go and watch 10 different artists play the same piece they're trying to play, right? But then you see, wow, they're making it to the top with that fingering. I should be able to do that, or I'm just not good enough or something, right? So yeah, just to recognize that there are just so many different ways to do the same thing, and to express yourself, right?
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And speaking of expression, you are expressing yourself on your new album. And I just thought it was wonderful that it's all solo violin. How often do we get to have a solo violin album? And yeah, just nice to explore that sound and all the different ways that it can express. So this is it's called Back to Bach, and you have 3 pieces on there, starting with the Partita number 2 from Bach. So tell us a little bit about what drew you to these particular pieces and putting this together.
Yes. So my album is out. It's my first solo album, which is extremely exciting, but also very almost nerve-wracking.
Sure.
It was a very challenging experience, but it was the most teaching experience I've had in the past few years as an artist first and foremost, and as a violinist, and as a human being also. So it's very, very dear to my heart. Yes, so there are 3 works there. The first one, as you mentioned, it's the second partita for violin solo by Bach, and also I also play Jesse Montgomery's first Rhapsody for solo violin on there, and Missy Mazzoli's Dissolve Oh My Heart. The album was created in the winter of 2021, which was pre-vaccinations and very cold and almost very dark kind of winter for, I believe, many people. We've been in this sort of unknown situation, dealing with a lot of difficult emotions for many, many months. At that point, almost a year, really. For us artists, performing artists, musicians, it's been challenging in ways. I don't want to say it's been more challenging than for other people, but yeah, I'm dealing with a lot of difficult emotions and isolation. And in that state, I was dealing with the question of what can I do as an artist at this point of time. I think that's a question that a lot of artists ask themselves. And my point of view was sort of, how do I make this challenging situation that involves a lot of sort of difficult emotions, how do I make it something beautiful? How do I create connection and intimacy in times where those things are so missing from my life, and I'm sure from a lot of people's lives as well. So I knew that I wanted to do something with that, and I am a true believer of the power of music and beautiful emotions that it can bring up, and the way that it connects people, not only to themselves and to their own souls, but to people around them and people in their lives. So that was the ground of the entire album. And then from that, I decided to make it a solo album, as a representative of, the solitude and the maybe even the loneliness that I know I was experiencing, and I know a lot of other people were experiencing. Yes, I think Bach is all his works, but specifically his 6 works for violin solo are works of music that invite a lot of intimacy and between the performer and the listener, and potentially can bring up a lot of emotions and create connections between people and also between a person and their deeper emotions and deeper selves. So that was my first choice, and then I really wanted to add a bit of a more modern touch to it, and I thought it would be interesting to showcase how deep Bach's influence was. And these are 2 works that I've heard in the past, and I thought it was beautiful and interesting to hear how even 300 something years later, composers and artists in general are so deeply influenced by his works. Missy Mazzoli's work actually starts with a citation from the chaconne. So that was a pretty direct and easy choice to make. And Jessie Montgomery's Rhapsody is a first piece in a series of 6 that she hasn't complete yet. But as you for sure know, 6 is a number that Bach used a lot. It's influenced by that, but by the violin solo pieces and also by the cello solo pieces.
Yeah, the 6 cello suites as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was reading up a little bit on these other 2, and I liked as well. Just last month, it was all about female composers was the topic. So it's nice to have this Bach, and then we have these 2 female artists who are both violinists as well, right? They are first and foremost maybe violinists. How did you come across these works, actually?
Well, Missy Mazzoli, I actually have a good friend who is a violinist too, and she played that piece in a recital, and I just loved the character of sound, and I loved the effect that it had on me when I listened to it. And because that's something that it's a big thing that guides my work and my choices, the way it affects other people. So I thought it would be interesting to do. And Jessie Montgomery is a composer that I came across a few years ago. She is a New Yorker, so I thought that connection is interesting too. I heard a few chamber works of hers and works for orchestra, and I really loved them, and I thought they were extremely communicative. And then I found out she has this solo piece that she wrote pretty recently, a couple of years ago, and I sort of fell in love in it and decided to add it too.
Yeah, they were a nice combination with the Partita. Definitely a little bit more of a modern feel, but then you could definitely tell that they were drawing influence from Bach and other styles. To me, Dissolve My Heart almost had a little bit of like an Eastern European influence in there, perhaps at some point. At least for me, that's what it reminded me of a little bit, and sort of these dissonances and of course that opening chord from the chaconne, kind of tying it all together. And then the Jessie Montgomery, the Rhapsody, a little bit of almost like Vaughan Williams, or just sort of that open spaciousness, right? And yeah, it was a really nice combination. I felt that those 2 really supported each other well, and then supporting the Bach. So yeah, maybe we can hear just a few clips of these, and we'll get people interested in checking out more.
I'm so happy you found the combination to be interesting.
Definitely. Let's dive into a few clips here. Let's maybe hear a little bit of the Bach chaconne from his Partita number 2 in D minor. And then we'll hear a little clip of Missy Mazzoli's Dissolve My Heart, followed by Jessie Montgomery's Rhapsody number 1. Enjoy. Thanks so much for sharing these, and anyone who's interested in hearing the rest of these songs, which I hope many of you will be, please head over to Maya's website, mayalorenzen.com. That's MAYALORENZEN. And you can also listen on Apple Music and Spotify. So you're talking about the different emotions and how pieces make you feel, and how, you hope maybe your audience feels, your listeners feel. How do you sort of get yourself in the right mindset to prepare and perform a piece, any piece, but different pieces like this that are on your album, maybe starting with the Bach, where we have these different movements, the chaconne, which is obviously quite a range of emotions, and sort of like what you were saying before, that almost like digging deeper into ourselves, or that like spirituality or something is there, right? Versus something that's a little bit more playful. One of the other movements, the jig or something like that. Yeah. How do you sort of create that space for yourself and for your listener to get into that mood and to express that?
That's an amazing question. In regards to Bach, as you put it so well, it's a partita, which means it's a collection of dances, historically. And I always, with the partitas, I try to come from that angle and to really feel the rhythm and the lightness versus the heaviness that certain movements have. And that's where I started. Generally speaking, with everything that I ever prepare, I think that it's extremely important to incorporate this kind of work from the very beginning. So with practicing technical issues and with practicing, intonation and sound and articulation and memorizing everything that we go through technically, I incorporate that with the emotion and the mood that I'm going for. So not that I never, that I, just decide on something and that's the mood that I go for my entire life. But I really am very conscious about deciding and giving sections, movements, phrases a name emotionally. So I would always have an emotion for the movement itself, and then I would choose or select certain sections where it might be different, or it might be more intense, or it might be opposite. And I would name that, and I would let that be my guide through the process of learning the piece. Different ears, different people are going to feel different things, and that's the beauty. That's the beauty of art. But I do believe that if you put emotion into your work, it will also come out the other side, or will also be perceived this way.
Well, yeah, coming up with sort of like an emotional map with different maybe adjectives, it sounds like, to describe different sections, and really sort of, it sounds like you go and you break down a piece into maybe, different phrases have a different feel, and sort of, so of course there's the technical phrasing and everything you have to do for the bowing and the shifting and the fingerings and all of that, but it sounds like kind of behind the scenes there you have a map in some sense of where you want to go, and then that's of course is going to, I'm sure, inform what you do technically, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, actually, yeah, you had a video on your site of it was the Bach Concerto for Two Violins. And I enjoyed checking that out, and I felt that you had a different sense about it than I've heard from most people. A lot more sort of this just uplifting and playful, sort of more staccato, perhaps. And just as an example of sort of what we're talking about, it's nice to hear someone interpreting a piece in just a slightly different way. You go, huh, all right, this doesn't have to be this this intense sort of almost drudging, kind of way that I've heard that piece in some senses, in some places, but again, this playful dance, perhaps.
I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then, of course, just talking about the technical, I mean, there's a lot that you're dealing with in all of these pieces that you've recorded, but particularly the multi-stops. There's quite a few moments, of course, the chaconne, and also in these other two newer pieces, newer works, where you have to deal a lot with double stops, triple stops, quadruple stops. I think those are always challenging for people, and a lot of the listeners are violinists or at least string players themselves. Do you have any certain approaches that you take when you encounter these sorts of things in music? Like what's your starting point when you need to break down a section and start working it back up?
Double stops, triple stops, quadruple stops are always going to be challenging. The way I tackle it, I am a big believer of separating separating the hands, a little bit like pianists do. You know, pianists would almost automatically, when they encounter a really difficult passage, they would practice the right hand separately, and then they practice the left hand separately, and then they put it together. I'm sure there are other ways to practice, but that's something they do almost automatically. And me myself, I only started doing it well into my 20s. So after many years of playing the violin, and I love doing that with my young students because I always found it to be extremely helpful, and I love that I get to show them this way that's I think not presented enough. So specifically with double stops, what I mean by that, separating both hands, is I would start with the right hand and work on the sound and when I say just right hand, I mean the left hand is completely passive, meaning I'm playing open strings. So I would just practice with the right hand on the strings that I am about to play. With double stops, it's a little bit more straightforward because we are able to play two strings at a time. The work would just be about finding the kind of sound that I want, that I'm looking for, and plan my bow in a way that makes it as easy as possible or as least complicated as possible. So really finding ways to work with the natural abilities of the violin and my hands and the bow, rather than just do whatever happens and hope for the best. So I would do that, and then I would focus on my left hand, which means more intonation work. So with that, I'm a fan of separating and simplifying. So I would start with just cleaning the bass. So I would play the bass in this. This would just be in the case of double stops. So I would separate both voices and play them individually for intonation, but also for phrasing. And I would do so while also placing the other voice with my left hand, meaning my left hand is doing exactly what it's supposed to do eventually, but my right hand is only playing a voice that I want to work on. And then I decide on one voice that is my anchor. It's usually the lower voice, the bass, and I add the soprano, and I would take another step forward and in regards of intonation, and look at the bigger picture. So in terms of harmony, what chord are we in? What key are we in? What are the functions of the different notes that I'm playing? And then work on intonation accordingly.
So to clarify for people, like maybe talking about if it's the root note of the key you're in versus the leading tone versus the third, a lot of people might just assume that it's always just what it is, right? But of course on violins, we can micro adjust there a little bit. So sometimes, we want to be maybe dead on, it sounds like. Other times you might just decide to fudge something a little bit to bring something, maybe a closer half step or something. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, I mean, we're lucky that on the violin, as you said so nicely, we could fudge some things around, and intonation is not something that is always the same. We do have the ability to adjust according to the situation.
What notes we're playing against, or this is all, of course, talking about solo violin, but if we're playing with a piano or we're playing in an orchestra, or how that all works. But it sounds like most of the time you're focusing on sort of the bass notes first and tuning off of those, and That's what I was always told as well. And I really do like the practice technique that you're talking about, and I use it as well myself. I found it really helpful where you're still fingering the notes, all the notes, but you're only playing certain voices at a time. The lower line of voices, the higher line of voices. So I second that. I think that's a really good practice technique.
Hey.
Yeah, yeah. And then of course with triple stops and multi stops, there's a little bit more complication with how are we going to break these chords. I suppose a lot of that is the timing of the passage, how long you have to sort of fit it in there. But how do you go about that? Maybe with Baroque music, contrasting with maybe other eras of music as well. Is there a different thought process you go through to figure out how to approach these chords? I've heard some players really sort of roll into some of the chords and almost do separate voices of each note. And then, of course, with more modern works and romantic era works and stuff, it's always the 2 and 2, or for a quadruple stop, it seems like. So yeah, how do you go about that?
Yes, that's also a really interesting question. So I typically try to go for a very full, warm sound in my playing as a bass. So when I have quadruple stops, I actually play 2 plus 2 plus 2. So G and the D string together, and then the D and the A, and then the A and the E, rather than just go G and D together and then A and E. Because I find that it just creates a fuller, just a fuller, more warm sound, and the chord is rounder by doing that. Of course, I don't break it in a way that I pause on those pairs. So I would practice 2 plus 2 plus 2, and then smoothen out those transitions to create that kind of roundness in the sound. But when looking at different times, like the three works that I focused on are from such different times, and chords should be played, or at least should be approached differently. Well, in regards to Baroque, with the Baroque bow and the Baroque violin, it was very difficult to play even double stops, but chords were pretty impossible to play. And typically players would roll anything that was above two notes together, so triple stops and quadruple stops for sure. And so I love when people do that, and I think it sounds really beautiful on Baroque instruments. But I find personally that on modern instruments, the sound doesn't carry through so much as it would on a Baroque instrument. So it's really difficult to do it in a way where you really get that chord sound. So I still take the the approach of finding roundness in chords, and I stick to my 2 plus 2 plus 2. But I also always think about the voice leading, meaning where the melody is located versus where the accompaniment or the harmony or the chord is. And so sometimes, typically the melody is on the top, is in the top voice or on the top string, and the harmony is on the lower strings. But sometimes Bach likes to switch it around, and sometimes it would be on the D string or on the A string or on the G string, and a lot, like we have on a lot of fugues. So I do try to be very mindful of that in regards to what note I would stay more or what note I would stay on.
I think that's really important to consider, and especially if it's maybe a chord that's interspersed with single notes that are walking down from somewhere. Like there has to be that melody flow through the whole passage, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a nice way to think about it. And probably in setting up, like we were talking about before, with the intonation on the left hand and the different voices that you might be emphasizing there too, making sure that those notes especially are working together harmonically in that passage, the intonation, right? Mm-hmm. Well, anything else you want to mention about this album, and tell us where you can go and listen to it or download it?
Well, it's out on all the major streaming services. So it's on Spotify and it's on Apple Music. You can also find me on YouTube, where it's going to be uploaded soon. You can also go to my profile on Bandcamp and purchase the album.
Bandcamp is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, we'll have those links in the show notes. And
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely encourage people to go check them out. And I was happy to see I'll add their links too, but on the websites of these two ladies who have composed these two pieces that you've included, you can buy sheet music from their websites. So if people want to play them, they can go download them and play them.
Absolutely. Go support those artists. They are amazing composers and writing beautiful music.
We've been talking a lot about some technique and training, and I'm just wondering, so you have a multicultural background. It sounds like you've lived in quite a few different places in your life, and how has that informed your violin playing? Have you found some real differences in sort of the training and the approaches in these different places? Let's talk a little bit about your background and where you came from.
Yes, absolutely. So I was born and raised in Israel, in Tel Aviv specifically, and that's where I got my first musical education and my first violin lessons and so on. I then moved to Germany to get my master's. I studied in Hamburg, and I graduated and I stayed there for a few years, and I freelanced there a lot. So I was both a student there and in the working scene as well. And then I moved to New York, which is a very, very, very different place. And I, as we discussed at the very beginning, got my DMA, my doctorate degree at Stony Brook University. But I've lived in New York City the entire time. So, I feel really lucky to have experienced that. I find that, well, first of all, not only I studied in different countries and in different schools, but also my teachers come from very different backgrounds and have different influences, which I think was even more influential on my studying process and my learning process. But I do find that those three main places really shaped me as an artist and as a violinist. And a huge part of it is obviously experiencing the mentality of the place. So living in Israel, because it's my home, I was always very comfortable, and I guess that comes with a lot of being very laid back, just being comfortable. And I studied with a teacher that has a lot of influences from the Hungarian school, and that was really, really fascinating. So there's a certain strictness that comes with that kind of school, but also an incredible virtuosity. So I got to experience that. And then moving to Germany, I got to experience the true, or maybe the history and the tradition, and a bit similarly to what I said about Leopold Mozart, the structure and the patterns, and that's how things have been done for centuries. And I learned all that, and I really lived that because I was there and I experienced people mentality, and not only having violin lessons and being in a school, but also going to the post office and talking to people in the supermarket. It's just like you experience the culture that is still, very much very distinct and very traditional, incredibly different than anywhere else I've ever lived in. So I think that was a huge part of studying, was living there and experiencing the culture and people's mentality. And then moving to the States, it's the new world and the openness and the spirit of experiment and open-mindedness and multicultural environment, and being very modern, very edgy. So of course I studied with, I had the incredible luck to study with incredible violinists and incredible musicians, but I think a huge part of it is also just living and experiencing culture in different places in the world.
It's a nice journey you've been on. I just kind of have this image of, the young you who's in Israel studying with a teacher who has a background in Hungarian, kind of the Hungarian school, and sort of that passion and, like you said, the virtuosity of that. And then it's like you take this journey to Germany where there's this structure and this is how it's done. And I loved my time in Germany when I've been there, but yeah, there's this certain feeling of like, of course, this is how you do it. Just little things like around, staying with someone in their home or something. Oh, that's an interesting towel warmer you have over there. Of course, don't you have those too? No, actually we don't. Well, of course you need that. Just little things like that just really struck me. And then you're able to, kind of grow into your playing, I'm sure, with your masters there, and that technique I'm sure that you're given there. And then, coming to, like you said, the new world, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like anything's possible, right? There's that openness. So it's a nice journey, and can see how all of that is supportive, and maybe at different times. Yeah. And you're taking part in an orchestra. It sounds like it's based in Israel. Is that right? The West-Eastern Divan Orchestra. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Yeah, that sounds really interesting. And just how they're trying to sort of draw, there's been such conflict in that part of the world, but to draw people together through music.
So it's an orchestra, was born with the mission of bringing musicians in the Middle East together, and creating something that sort of shows the world like it's possible to work together, and it's possible to be friends, and we're all human beings, and we can also we not only we can get along, but we can create something really beautiful together if we come together and overcome, all put our conflicts aside. Indeed, the orchestra members are all from the Middle East, so Israelis like me, people from Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, Palestine, Iran, Iraq, all corners of the world. Many of them don't live in the country they were born in. A lot of them live in different countries in Europe or in the States, but we are all, of that background and very connected to our backgrounds. And we meet up once or twice a year to rehearse and play a lot of concerts together in amazing halls with Daniel Barenboim, who was one of the greatest musicians that ever lived. And it's been an amazing experience.
And it's nice, it sounds like, being part of a touring orchestra, because you get to experience, not only are all of these Middle Eastern cultures and countries coming together, but then you're going and you're sharing that music through all of these different countries, it sounds like, right? And do you have any favorite memories of touring with the orchestra or being in different places that just sort of stick with you?
Well, it might be a little bit cliche to say, but I really love every moment of it. And for me, it's more about the general state of mind that we're all in when we're touring together, and also when we go to our separate ways. That notion of it's possible, and we're such good friends. They say the best way to love your what is it? Love your enemy or love your neighbor is to know your neighbor. I'm not sure that was correct, but
Yeah, I think too. Yeah.
um,
There's a saying in there, but yeah, to put differences aside, right?
yes.
And
And
yeah.
I remember a conversation I had with one of my good friends there, who's from Egypt, and he told me, in growing up, um, we learn in school that you're the enemy. We learn in school that Israelis are this satanic character that's trying to hurt us and hurt a lot of other people, and you're the enemy, and we learn to hate you. And then I came to this orchestra, and I couldn't believe, I never thought I would have Israeli friends or that I would even get along with any of you. And I think a lot of people feel this way. I don't have a similar story, but I've never met anyone from Lebanon prior to this experience. When Israel has been in war with Lebanon for ever. And to meet people from there and to become their friends is just incredibly special.
Yeah, if we could all just meet the people that we're so afraid of or we're racist against or whatever, right? Be a completely
Absolutely.
different world. Yeah, I think so. Sit down and have a nice jam, right?
Yeah, it's
Read some
beautiful.
quartets.
Oh, what a great idea.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds wonderful. Well, yeah, so conflict externally. Let's move into sort of these internal conflicts that we all experience. You've had some experience with this as well. And I was thinking about this earlier today before the call, just how I know from my experience, starting off playing violin, it's just like a whole new world, and we're a beginner and we have no idea where this is going to go. And then at some point, it shifts into, oh, I've got to work hard. I've got to get everything right. I've got to pass this audition. All of these other things start to come in and can sometimes color just that initial spark of just exploration and joy that we feel for music, right? So how have you been able to keep that or come back to that in your life?
Yes. Well, I think that should be the core of every day, and the core of our work, um, all the time, because that's why that's the reason we play music, and that's the reason we started that journey to begin with. So I do a very regular sort of mental work with myself, and I am someone that's very dedicated to maintaining my mental health, but also making progress, or get better uh, with my routines, and get better with the ways that I find. So it's really, it's almost like taking your vitamins, something that you need to do when things are good, even when things are good and you're not, and you're feeling great, and you don't even understand why you need to do it because everything is great, on a regular basis. And then it really, really, really helps you when things are not so great. Um, so I find that that's the most effective way for me, is to just regularly work on my mental well-being outside of playing music, but also in regards um, to being a violinist. I've had a lot of ups and downs in my life and in my career, and starting with the school that I wanted to go to, and then things that happened during school, auditions, and then transitioning into professional life. So yeah, I've had to handle a lot of downs, and I've done it in different ways. And one way that might be a little bit controversial, but I think is very helpful, is to take a break. and I'm not necessarily talking about, quitting violin or putting it down for a year or a month even, but just, my father always says, if you get frustrated in the practice room, put the violin down and go for a walk. And I think that's the mini version of when you're feeling very frustrated about things that happen in your career, or if things don't go your way, or rejection, or it could be deep frustration, or just being very disappointed. Put your violin down and just give yourself the time and the mental space and the permission almost to just be, and go back to feeling well in your body and in your personality. I think that's really, really important. So that's one thing. And then I found in the last few years, and this is by no means, a perfect method or a perfect approach, but as I said, I'm very committed to exploring and developing that side of my being. But I try to be very very focused on the impact that I have, and the commitment that I have to find my place in society where I can contribute most and be most of service. And I find that when I think about people around me and the impact that my work might have, is where I find the sense of mission again, that I started this journey with. So that's been guiding me a lot in the past few years.
Having a sense of a mission. Yeah, I like that. Taking that step back, when you're feeling frustrated, like you're saying, again, like to me, it hopefully we don't go away and like we're still frustrated and we're still, but it's like, it's that time that we're giving ourselves to kind of transform that feeling into something else, right? And to look at why we got so frustrated with that passage, or with the fact we didn't get into that orchestra we hoped we'd get into, or that school we'd hoped we'd get into, or what are we really wanting? So your mission, what can you really contribute? And it's true, we all have such different skill sets, and I think just like our natural personality, like where can that blossom? Sometimes, I think you had an Instagram post not too long ago, but it's like the career that's perfect for you is not necessarily what you set out to create. Exactly. Maybe it's still in the same, it's still in music or something, but it's maybe just slightly different than what you anticipated. I certainly found that for myself, and have gone through those moments of reflection where it's like, well, I could do this and everyone else is doing that. I should do that. But what could I really contribute that would be unique, that would maybe help a certain set of people that, that I can really make a difference for? So what's your current mission, or just describe that a little bit for us, maybe?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you understood my point exactly. Thank you for clarifying. So right now I perform a lot, but I also teach a lot, which I find extremely rewarding and I love. My big umbrella mission is to help people connect to their inner selves and inner emotions through music. But I also find that with teaching, I can do or strive for something pretty similar, that is give my students that kind of confidence that they can tackle a challenge and really overcome it. And I think that the sense of reward and confidence that comes with it is something that is such a gift for especially young students, but also my adult students who I have a lot of students who played as children and are coming back to it later in life, and just to see the joy that it brings them, and the sense of accomplishment, but also connection to themselves is extremely rewarding. And that's something I focus a lot on, just creating that sort of ease and comfort and confident in solving problems with all the students I have, so that they can really play in a way that they feel they can express themselves, and kind of the opposite of struggling with the instrument, but really, really enjoying what they create.
Empowering them to feel like they can do what they need to do. They can get where they want to go. Yeah. It's great that you're teaching both kids and adults, and it's interesting. I'm curious if you discover this too, but with the kids, it's sort of like, they're expanding. They don't know who they are yet necessarily. Their personalities are forming, kind of reining it in so that they know how to practice correctly and stuff like this. And then the adult students, it's almost kind of reawakening that childlike, like, joy and discovery again, right? Because sometimes they've gotten themselves into kind of a spiral of doubt or something like that. And I found as a teacher myself, it's nice just to explore those different types of students, because it all comes back to us, right? And how we can express ourselves more too, whether we're performing or teaching, or, how can we be most effective? Do you have any tips for students who are kind of juggling these things and trying to sort of learn to manage their time well in the practice room, and maybe students who are considering this as a career, and maybe they are wondering how they're going to juggle their lives in sort of an unconventional career?
Yes, well, I have I have a couple of tips. So in regards to just managing your time and maybe being most productive you can, or maximizing on the how you use your time, I would always make sure I have a plan for everything. So I usually do a very goal-oriented monthly plan. Then I would break it down to the smallest, most doable, most easy, most chewable tasks, and sort of delegate them weekly. And that's something you obviously need to do after you realize, or after you determine how much time you have for practicing, because as a student, you're going to have classes, and you're going to have times where you have to sit down and write papers or do your homework, or you have your commute, you have to work. Make yourself a very clear plan, and find those blocks of time where you can practice, and break down those goals to the smallest, most doable units. I find that's having a plan in general is key, but also being extremely clear with what you're trying to achieve. Also, if you don't follow the plan 100%, you have to be okay with it, because we're all human and life happens, and there's a certain capacity of information and energy that we have, and everyone is different. So it's trial and error, but also be kind with yourself. I think that's very, very, very important. I spent way too many years of my life being very unkind to myself, and it hasn't been helpful. And I'm sure a lot of people feel this way. And yes, in regards to juggling different things in your career,
look it up.
I think that when you just start out, I do believe that it's important to say yes.
I think I've heard that before, but I can't
things
remember right now.
because when you're young and inexperienced, like, often you don't really know what exactly it is that you want and what exactly is the direction that you want to go. Yeah, but also to get your name out there and to be successful and create connections, you do have to do as much as possible. And you never know what things are going to bring up. You know, you never know where the next opportunity is going to come from. I've experienced getting amazing opportunities from the most unexpected situations. So when you're just starting out, I think it's really, really important to experience everything you can, to the point where, you know, it becomes too much and maybe you're more clear about your goals and you can pan it out sort of. But I think it is very important. And be extremely professional when you do those things, because again, it can be the most random thing in the world and you don't think it's important, but maybe there's someone there that you know, I'm not trying to sell some kind of a Cinderella story, but it's just the practice of being professional is very important. It's the way you present yourself is very, very important, just because it shows respect. It makes other people around you love to work with you, and it makes the whole experience much better as well. So do it for other people, for people around you, but also do it for yourself, because it will make the whole thing way more enjoyable and show that you respect yourself first and foremost.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, we've all probably heard stories of, you know, the person who showed up at the coffee shop to perform in the corner, and then there happened to be some major person sitting there amongst the few people that actually showed up. And of course, you want to be someone who's professional playing in the corner, you know, in that moment, versus someone who's kind of upset that, oh, why weren't more people here? Or why am I not in Carnegie Hall right now instead? And one of these things, right?
Yeah.
So you just never know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you use that word respect, you know, it doesn't really matter. Again, like going back to, you know, you're trying to help people express themselves, whether that's your student or your audience member. You could just be playing for one person and it makes their day. And I liked this idea of setting monthly goals and then breaking things down with, of course, the knowledge that some things aren't going to go quite your way sometimes, or you know, what I thought about with that was just how many times students set their goals, but they just don't really know what's going to go into that goal. They're not experienced enough yet. They think, oh, I'm going to blast through, you know, this whole concerto in this month, and then next month I'll blast through another one, and they just don't have the experience yet of what it might take to work up something like that, for example, right? And then feel down about, I didn't do this, I'm not good enough, you know. I have students who are like, do you think I'm where I should be? And it's like, well, are we getting better? Are we improving week to week, month to month? Yes. Well, you're probably where you need to be then. And that's I like that. And you know, I'm assuming as months go by, you're able to sort of recalibrate a little bit better. We get better at setting those goals and knowing how we need to break things down and what kind of time we need to spend. And
yeah, I mean, I'm still learning, you know.
we're all still learning, yeah.
Process, and thank you so much for bringing that up. It's really, really all work in progress, and there's nothing wrong about that. We're all just in the process of getting to know ourselves and our abilities, and perhaps at the beginning of such process, it's a great idea to get help from your teacher or from a colleague or from a friend or from a mentor or from a chamber music coach, someone that you trust and respect. And I'm sure many people will be more than happy to help.
Well, it's true. I mean, having those people who've come before us, who've already walked that path, I mean, just getting an assignment from a lesson is so beautiful in that future process of when we're on our own, knowing what's achievable in a week. Oh, my teacher thought it was achievable for me to learn that scale and do that etude and do, that page and a half of that piece. Oh, okay. And that's really different than, a lot of folks now, I think out there's just so much material online where you can kind of teach yourself. But just that connection with someone who has been there is just so important, with just kind of showing us like what's possible, right?
Yeah, that's a great point.
Well, just maybe a couple more questions and then we'll let you go. Thank you so much for sharing all of this wisdom and your experience. But people are always curious about instruments and strings and what kind of shoulder rests maybe people use, or I know it's all individual, but maybe do you want to share a little bit about your instrument and kind of your setup, what you've come to these days, what you're enjoying?
Sure. So I am extremely lucky to, I have an instrument in loan, which is a Petrozzini from 1920, and it's a beautiful instrument. I've had it for 7 years now. And I have my fair share of experimentation with shoulder rests and shin rests. I played without a shoulder rest at all for a year, and I found that it was very beneficial in helping me learn how to be more relaxed and loosen up both my hands. I felt very free for a lot of the time, but then every time I performed, I felt like I was really holding my instrument in a way that, just clunching into everything, mortified that it would fall, and I just felt like it wasn't, all the good work that I did in the practice room was ruined on stage.
Oh no. I could understand that. Yeah, I've tried to go without a shoulder rest on a few occasions, and it's just, I've got this collarbone that kind of sticks up. It doesn't feel comfortable to have anything like too dramatically sitting on it.
Right.
So
I think it's an important experience. I think everyone should occasionally practice without a shoulder rest. I find that practicing shifting without a shoulder rest is a very, very, very helpful and very interesting to begin with, because if you do that, you suddenly realize how much you rely on that shoulder rest. And once you take it off, you actually need to learn how to shift. So I find that extremely helpful if anyone is looking for new ways to work on shifting. Just try taking your shoulder rest off. But right now, I do play with the shoulder rest. I play with a wolf, very simple, nothing fancy. I just bent it in a certain way that sits well on my shoulder. I like having one side of the violin sit on my collarbone, just because it's comfortable for me because of the shape of my bone. It's not, everyone is different, and I think needs to find a way that works for them, and also needs to explore and experience different setups before deciding. And I also know a lot of active performers who constantly change. So unless it's a real obsession, I think it's healthy to, always look for ways that you feel more comfortable with. I use Vision Solo for strings, which I find work really well with my violin. They have the good combination of clear but also warm sound. Occasionally, I would use Pirazzi. I have a Pirazzi. Yes, and that's about it. I think I'm pretty simple with my setup and things that I use.
Yeah, I like the wolf shoulder rests too. I've used them primarily, and I like how you can bend them and
Mhm.
kind of to fit, maybe not as much as like the Bon Musica, which is gonna like kind of, it's quite heavy, right? And it kind of
Yeah.
locks you in. So there's still some movement, but yeah, a little bit of a better contour maybe than some of the other ones that are just sort of set, the contour is already set. Yeah, I like those. And I think I
Mhm.
have tried the vision strings at some point along the way. I think I like those. It's always different, each set of strings kind of has its own maybe
Yeah.
overtone, undertone series, and yeah, that's just a little bit unique. So it's important, like you said, to sort of look and experiment with your personal body shape and your violin, and I don't think that's one size fits all at all for any of this. Yeah. Well, what are you looking forward to? You just finished this huge project of your doctorate. Are you just going to rest for a while, or you have some other plans coming up?
Yeah, well, I'm actually going on tour with the Divan tomorrow.
Oh,
So I'm
wow.
looking forward to that. We're going to Paris and Milan and Brussels, and we're playing beautiful program, and I'm excited to see all my friends. And I haven't been able to play with them in the last 2 years because of travels travel restrictions. So I really can't wait to be reunited with my friends and play beautiful music with them. And then I really hope I get to rest a little bit. Hopefully, you know, towards the end of the school year. So when I come back, I have some students recitals that I'm also very much looking forward to. It's always so amazing to get to take my students through that journey of preparing a concert and playing and everything that brings. And then hopefully after that, I can take a few days off, dare I say a week, to
Sure.
refresh and regain energy. And yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Maya. It's been wonderful chatting with you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure. I've been a longtime fan, and I'm so glad that we got to chat today. Thank you so much.
Thanks again to Maya Lorenzen for joining us today and sharing her new album, Back to Bach, which I hope you will check out. I will have some links in the show notes, and her wisdom and experience. It's great to hear about someone who is out there doing what they love to do and making it work. And Maya is definitely someone who is doing that. So please head to her website, mayalorenzen.com. That's MAYALORENZEN, mayalorenzen.com. And I will have that link as well as these other links in the show notes. One piece of our conversation that stuck with me was the simplicity, yet the importance of setting a monthly goal. And I think just so much of the time when we're practicing, it's just kind of 1 month rolls into the other, 1 year rolls into the other, and we forget to really take stock of where we're at and maybe just some of the little things that can get us to the next level. And this idea of setting a monthly goal and then breaking it down into chunks is so important. And it's something that I like to keep track of in a personal practice journal. And I've talked about that on the podcast in the past. But just having a log and years of logs, going back and seeing what I've been working on and being able to, most of the time, just very simply write down what I practiced and a few key points, maybe how things were going, certain measures or sections I want to return to, maybe some exercises that I want to make sure that I'm keeping around for a little while to address a certain technical issue. But it's been very helpful. And I just think back to the times like when I was a child before I had this idea of keeping track of things. And thankfully, those were times when I had a teacher. So I suppose week to week there were goals, but it's been really nice for me to have that, to stay honest with myself now that I'm free reign. I'm a free reign artist. So I really appreciated Maya saying that and talking about that. And it just seemed like something that so many of us can just kind of pass over. Oh yeah, monthly goal, whatever. But I just wanted to say that was one particular thing that we did talk about that really did stick with me, and it was a good reminder for me. It was a good reminder, hopefully for many of you out there, to just really think about, in whether it's a month or it's a week or it's a year, like whatever that time frame is for you, but to think about what your goals are for your music, and then to be able to find a path there. Because I think when we do find these setback times, or these times when we might feel a little bit down about our music and about ourselves, it's when we really haven't had a good methodical path to where we want to get to. So of course, how are we going to get there? We have no map. So really, to create that map, that was a really nice takeaway. And so many other things. So we wish Maya all the best with all of her travels coming up here. Yeah, hopefully we'll hear from her again down the road. So again, I am Laurel Thomsen, and my website is laurelthomsen.com. That's LaurelThomsen. On there you can find information about me, my teaching, my recordings, and plenty of other stuff, including my Violin Geek blog, which is the companion here to the podcast. Let's see, since the last podcast, I know I put out at least one kind of funny blog post, which was about scammers. I have had this run of scammers lately, and it's been very interesting to be getting all of these messages after quite a few years of not getting scammers so much for my music career. I used to get quite frequently, some scammers for violin lessons. And that was probably 10, 15 years ago. It was kind of a run of scammers. And I got hip to the idea that they are out there and was able to pretty quickly weed them out. But they've gotten better at their grammar and English, stuff like this. So it's a little bit harder to tell. And there's been a few that I've gotten recently for music lessons, but mostly it's been actually for live performance, which is new to me. And anyway, in that blog post, I just kind of got fed up with it. And so about a month ago, I decided, let's just turn the tables on the scammer. And I didn't get a response, but I haven't gotten any more scammer emails or text messages since then. So maybe now they're on to other people. But anyway, I in that blog post, I wrote out what I had written to the scammer, and it's just meant to be kind of a humorous post, but you're welcome to use it and recycle it if you're having these problems too. It certainly worked. They did not respond, like I said, but that was one post that I did recently. Been also writing a little bit for Strings Magazine recently. There is an article coming out later this year about music notation programs. And so I got quite busy in the last month reviewing 6 different notation programs. And that article, I'm not quite sure what the published date will be on it yet, but it's very interesting to fill up my computer hard drive with all of some of these new notation programs. I think, Finale and Sibelius are the kind of old standbys that a lot of us have used for many years, one or the other, depending on which camp we're in. But there are tons of other ones out there now, including ones where if you have an iPad, you can just, with an Apple Pencil, kind of scribble down, just as if you were writing manually on staff paper. And then the program will turn it into, hopefully very neat looking sheet music. So yeah, it's just incredible what's out there. And I definitely will mention that article when it is coming out and let you guys know. But if you're not a subscriber to Strings Magazine, it's a nice magazine to subscribe to. So you might just do that, and then you'll be sure to get that copy eventually when it does come out later this year. In any case, I hope you have a great start to your summer. And I will see you soon with more episodes. I have some different topics coming up that hopefully people will enjoy, including some sort of playing health issues, how to feel better in our bodies. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you guys very soon. And until next time, happy practicing.